The film opens with Toby Burns, a 17-year-old boy, inside his suburban home. The atmosphere is quiet, almost eerily so, as Toby sits in the living room. His father, David Burns, tries to connect with his son, but Toby, lost in his own world, often dismisses him. This dynamic is highlighted when David calls for Toby, asking him to help with something outside. Toby, annoyed and distracted, refuses. This moment of rejection becomes a haunting memory for Toby, as it's the last interaction he has with his father. Outside, David is suddenly attacked by a group of thieves. The scene is chaotic and brutal, leaving David dead and his car stolen. Toby, unaware of what's happening until it's too late, is left traumatized by the loss. Weeks later, Toby is seen in therapy, struggling to cope with his father's death. He's withdrawn, barely engaging with the therapist, and clearly haunted by the trauma. The therapist suggests an unconventional approach to help Toby process his grief, an outdoor excursion designed to challenge him and force him to confront his emotions. Reluctantly, Toby agrees. The next day, Toby finds himself on a boat with a group of other teenagers, all of whom seem to be dealing with their own struggles. Their guide, Kay, is a no-nonsense woman who congratulates them on making it this far but quickly introduces their next challenge, surviving alone on a remote island for 3 days. The assignment is meant to test their resilience and self-reliance. Toby is the first to be dropped off, and Kay assures him she'll return in 3 days to pick him up. Alone on the island, Toby begins to set up camp. He gathers wood, builds a makeshift shelter, and tries to make the best of his situation. However, the island is far from welcoming. The dense forest feels oppressive, and the sounds of wildlife are unnerving. Toby talks to himself to pass the time, a coping mechanism that highlights his growing loneliness and desperation. His situation takes a turn for the worse when a group of monkeys invades his camp, stealing all the food he had carefully rationed for the 3 days. Toby chases them away, but it's too late, his supplies are gone. Frustrated and angry, he lashes out at the monkeys, screaming into the void. Later, Toby finds an oyster in the water and stave off his hunger. But after eating it, he becomes violently ill. Desperate for relief, he ventures into the forest in search of something to calm his stomach. As he walks deeper into the woods, he becomes increasingly paranoid, sensing that something, or someone, is watching him. The tension builds as he hears rustling in the bushes and sees fleeting shadows. Suddenly, he spots a figure lurking behind the trees. Panicked, Toby runs back to his campsite and fires his flare gun in the forest, hoping to scare off the mysterious stalker. The stress and fear overwhelm him, and he collapses, losing consciousness. The next morning, Toby wakes up in a different part of the forest, disoriented but alive. Beside him are 2 coconuts, which he eagerly drinks from. As he regains his strength, he notices a girl by the shore, searching for something in the water. Shocked and curious, Toby follows her into the forest, where he witnesses her killing an animal with practiced ease. The girl, who introduces herself as Madeline, is enigmatic and speaks very little. She roasts the animal and shares the meal with Toby, offering him a sense of comfort he hasn't felt in weeks. Madeline's presence is both comforting and unsettling. She seems to know the island intimately, moving through it with a quiet confidence. When Toby asks her how long she's been on the island, she reveals that she's lived there her entire life, with only her mother as her companion. Toby assumes there must be a small community on the island, but Madeline's vague answers leave him with more questions than answers. As the day progresses, Madeline tends to Toby's wounds, using plants from the forest to soothe his injuries. She teaches him how to build a more secure shelter and even shows him how to properly cut open a coconut. Despite her kindness, there's an air of mystery about her. She warns Toby to stay close to the fire at night and to remain quiet, as her mother sometimes hunts in the area and could be dangerous. Toby, already on edge, begins to wonder what kind of life Madeline and her mother live on this isolated island. That night, Toby stays close to the fire as instructed, clutching the spear Madeline gave him for protection. The forest is alive with sounds, and every rustle of leaves sets him on edge. The next morning, Toby wakes to find Madeline preparing another meal for him. He tries to engage her in conversation, asking more about her life on the island, but she remains evasive. She tells him that her mother is protective and doesn't take kindly to strangers. Toby begins to suspect that Madeline's mother might be the figure he saw stalking him in the forest. As the 3 days come to an end, Kay returns to the island to retrieve Toby. She calls out for him but receives no response. Venturing into the forest, Kay becomes increasingly uneasy. The island feels different, more menacing. She hears strange noises and sees shadows moving in the trees. Suddenly, she loses her footing and falls. Before she can recover, she is attacked by an unseen assailant. Her fate is left ambiguous, but it's clear that the island holds a dark secret. The next day, Toby wakes up with a sense of urgency, remembering that Kay is supposed to return to fetch him. He gathers his belongings and makes his way to the shore, scanning the horizon for any sign of her boat. Minutes pass, and there's no sign of Kay. The calmness of the sea feels unnerving, and Toby's anxiety grows. Suddenly, he notices a life buoy floating in the water. It's out of place, and Toby's curiosity is piqued. He follows the trail of floating debris, which leads him to a capsized boat further out in the water. As Toby approaches the boat, he sees someone swimming away from it. He hides and watches from a distance, his heart pounding. Once the figure disappears, Toby swims to the boat and gets inside. He searches, he makes a horrifying discovery: Kay's lifeless body. Overcome with shock and fear, Toby screams, but the boat begins to sink rapidly. He barely manages to swim out before the boat is swallowed by the sea. Shaken and desperate, Toby returns to the forest. He decides to follow the path where he's seen Madeline emerge before, hoping to find answers. As he ventures deeper, he stumbles upon the charred remains of a chapel, its burned-out structure a haunting reminder of some past tragedy. Toby presses on, his unease growing with every step. Soon, he spots a woman in the distance, Madeline's mother, hunting a goat with ruthless efficiency. Toby changes direction, not wanting to be seen. He finds a makeshift shelter and cautiously enters, discovering Kay's belongings inside. The pieces begin to fall into place. The woman he saw swimming away from the boat was Madeline's mother. Toby's mind races as he tries to process what this means. Suddenly, Madeline and her mother enter the shelter, forcing Toby to hide. He listens as they speak in hushed tones, their conversation cryptic and unsettling. When they leave, Toby slips out and makes his way back to his camp, his mind swirling with fear and confusion. Later, Toby catches a fish and cooks it over a fire, but his appetite is gone. He's haunted by what he's seen and the realization that Madeline's mother might be responsible for Kay's death. As night falls, Toby is woken by noises in the forest. He investigates, only to be startled by Madeline, who appears behind him. She asks if he's okay, and Toby, overwhelmed, opens up about what he saw in the water. He tells her he believes her mother killed Kay and that he's now stranded on the island. Madeline listens but offers little in response, her expression unreadable. The next morning, Toby wakes to the sound of a plane flying overhead. He scrambles to his feet, shouting and waving, but the plane is too far away to notice him. Desperate, he makes his way to a nearby lighthouse, hoping to use it to signal for help. Inside, he finds an old torch, but it's out of fuel. As he searches for a solution, he encounters Cameron, another member of the therapy program who is also stranded on the island. The two bond over their shared predicament, and Toby shares food with Cameron. They fashion spears for protection, but their plans diverge. Cameron is determined to find a way off the island, while Toby refuses to leave without Madeline, convinced she's being held against her will. Toby ventures out alone to search for Madeline, but his journey takes a dark turn. He enters Madeline's shelter and comes face to face with her mother. A tense confrontation ensues, and Toby flees into the forest, with Madeline's mother hot on his heels. She eventually falls into one of Toby's traps, becoming pinned against a tree. As she cries out in pain, Toby confronts her, demanding to know if she killed Kay. To his shock, she reveals that it wasn't her, it was Madeline. She explains that an ancient spirit inhabiting the island transferred its essence into Madeline, transforming her into a powerful, monstrous entity. Madeline killed everyone on the island, including her own father, sparing only her mother. She warns Toby that Madeline must never leave the island, or countless others will die. Toby is given a handful of berries and told they can subdue Madeline when she transforms. He returns to Cameron to share what he's learned, but when he arrives at their campsite, Cameron is gone. Bloodstains on the ground tell a grim story. Suddenly, Madeline appears, but she's no longer the girl Toby knew. She's transformed into a monstrous creature. As she approaches, she shifts back into her human form and asks Toby why he killed her mother. Thinking quickly, Toby lies, saying he did it so they could leave the island together. Madeline, seemingly pleased with his answer, hugs him and kisses him forcefully. Toby seizes the moment to crush the berries into her mouth, causing her to collapse. With Madeline subdued, Toby retrieves fuel from her shelter and returns to the lighthouse. He pours the fuel into the generator, and the light flares to life, casting a beam across the sea. Toby scans the horizon, hoping to attract the attention of a passing ship. But his relief is short-lived. The monster reappears, attacking him. Toby remembers that light weakens the creature and lights the lighthouse on fire and locks her inside. Toby runs toward the sea. As he wades into the water, a police boat appears in the distance. Toby waves frantically, but before they can reach him, the monster emerges one last time. Later, the police, unaware of the true danger, rescue Madeline, mistaking her for a victim.